The airport buzzed with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to their gates, the soft hum of announcements blending with the chatter of the crowd. Among the sea of faces was Ryan Cole, a calm and sharply dressed man in his early 40s. He stood in the corner of the first-class lounge, his tailored navy suit and polished shoes reflecting the sophistication of someone who was no stranger to success. Ryan didn't flaunt his wealth. He carried himself with quiet confidence, his leather briefcase resting at his side. Focused on his phone, he reviewed a string of emails, occasionally typing quick responses with practiced ease. Behind his composed exterior lay the mind of a business powerhouse. His company, Horizon Technologies, a leader in aviation innovation, had revolutionized the way airlines operated. Though this wasn't immediately apparent to those around him, he was just another businessman heading to his next destination. Ryan glanced up at the clock, noting it was almost time to board. He closed his email app, tucked his phone into his pocket, and grabbed his briefcase as he walked toward the gate. The boarding process was seamless. As expected for first-class passengers, Ryan handed over his boarding pass and received a warm smile from the gate agent. "Have a pleasant flight, Mr. Cole," they said. Ryan nodded politely and stepped onto the plane, greeted by the head flight attendant, who directed him to his seat in the spacious first-class cabin. Moving with deliberate grace, Ryan found his window seat and settled in, placing his briefcase neatly under the seat in front of him. The leather recliner felt luxurious, and a welcome drink awaited on the side table. Pulling out his tablet, he began reviewing notes for an upcoming business proposal. Immersed in his work, he hardly noticed the other passengers settling in, but his peace was short-lived. A flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Emily Harper. Her uniform was crisp, her hair neatly tied back, but her expression carried a stiffness that was hard to ignore. Stopping beside Ryan's seat, she looked him over with narrowed eyes. "Excuse me, sir," Emily said, her tone polite but edged with authority. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Ryan looked up, calm and unbothered. "Yes, this is my seat," he replied evenly. Emily frowned, clearly dissatisfied. "Can I see your boarding pass?" she asked, her voice sharpening slightly. Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and handed her the boarding pass without hesitation. Emily examined it, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Humph," she muttered, handing it back. "Well, just so you know, first-class passengers must adhere to specific guidelines. Let us know if you need help understanding anything." Her words dripped with condescension. Ryan raised an eyebrow but chose not to engage. Placing the boarding pass back into his pocket, he returned to his notes, though the faint crease on his forehead betrayed his unease. Around him, a few passengers had taken notice, their whispers just audible over the cabin's ambient noise. As the last passengers boarded, Emily continued her rounds. She greeted others in first class with warmth and smiles, a stark contrast to her earlier demeanor toward Ryan. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in a blazer observed the interaction and raised an eyebrow at Ryan. When Emily moved on, he leaned over. "That was odd," the man said, his voice low. "She seemed tense." Ryan gave a faint smile, brushing off the remark. "Maybe she's having a rough day," he replied calmly. Despite his composed exterior, Ryan's thoughts churned. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered subtle but pointed acts of disrespect. He'd learned long ago how to navigate them with dignity and patience, but he knew when to act. And this time, something in him stirred. Shortly after takeoff, Emily returned to the cabin with a tray of drinks. She worked her way through the rows, offering beverages to passengers with a polished smile. But when she reached Ryan's seat, she hesitated. For a moment, it seemed she might say something, but she moved on without a word. The man across the aisle noticed. "She skipped you," he whispered, leaning closer. Ryan nodded subtly. "It seems so," he said, his tone measured. Minutes later, Ryan decided to address the issue. As Emily passed by again, he raised a hand slightly. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I believe I was missed during drink service. Could I have a glass of water?" Emily froze, her expression tightening. "I'll get to it when I can," she replied curtly before walking away. The tension in the cabin thickened as nearby passengers exchanged glances. The man across the aisle shook his head in disbelief. "What's her problem?" he muttered. Ryan's grip on his tablet tightened, though his expression remained calm. "Let's see how this plays out," he said softly. In the galley, Emily's unease grew. Her forced confidence cracked as she glanced toward the first-class cabin. Catching sight of Ryan's serene yet unyielding posture, she muttered something to a fellow attendant, who looked confused but said nothing. Meanwhile, Ryan's phone vibrated softly. He glanced at the screen and typed a quick reply before placing it back in his pocket. His gaze returned to the window, his mind already orchestrating his next move. The first-class cabin settled into a quiet rhythm as passengers adjusted to the flight. Rachel, a younger flight attendant with a warm demeanor, entered to assist with service. When she reached Ryan's seat, she paused, noticing his untouched tray. "Sir, would you like something to drink?" she asked kindly. Ryan's expression softened. "Just water, please," he replied. Rachel quickly returned with a glass. "If there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask," she added. "Thank you, Rachel," Ryan said, his tone genuine. From the galley, Emily watched, her irritation barely concealed. Minutes later, she reappeared in the cabin, this time with a new tactic. Leaning toward Ryan's seat, she spoke quietly but firmly. "Sir, I need to verify something about your seat. Could you step into the galley for a moment?" Ryan's brows furrowed slightly. "Is there an issue with my seat?" he asked evenly. "It's just a routine check," Emily replied. Avoiding eye contact, Ryan stood, briefcase in hand, and followed her to the galley. Passengers' murmurs filled the cabin as they watched the unusual scene unfold. Once in the galley, Emily's tone turned sharp. "I've noticed irregularities. I need to confirm whether your seat was booked correctly." Ryan's calm demeanor remained, but his tone grew firmer. "My ticket was scanned and verified. What exactly are you questioning?" Emily faltered, her confidence wavering. "There are certain standards for first-class passengers," she said vaguely. Ryan's jaw tightened. "If there's a specific issue, please state it clearly. Otherwise, I'd like to return to my seat." Without waiting for a response, he stepped past her, leaving Emily alone in the galley, her composure crumbling. Back in his seat, Ryan pulled out his phone and sent another message, his movements precise and deliberate. Across the aisle, the middle-aged man leaned closer. "Everything all right?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "It will be," he said. Minutes later, the intercom buzzed. The captain's calm voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us. Please let our crew know if you need anything." In the galley, Emily's phone buzzed almost immediately after the announcement. Picking it up, her face paled as the calm voice of an airline executive came through. "This is the executive office. We've been alerted to a potential issue regarding a first-class passenger. Ensure all passengers are treated respectfully. Any further incidents will be escalated." The call ended before Emily could respond. Trembling, she set the phone down and peeked through the galley curtain. Ryan remained seated, calm and unreadable, his presence now unnerving. The wheels of change had begun to turn, and Emily was realizing she was no longer in control.